There is a truth that very few people dare to admit: the deeper people love, the quieter they become. Not because their feelings have faded, and not because their hearts no longer tremble, but because love has moved beyond impulsive emotion and entered its most fragile emotional space. When love is not yet deep enough, we speak a lot, because we are not afraid of losing. We express freely, get upset freely, and say whatever we think without worrying too much about the consequences. But when love grows large enough, deep enough to become tied to our emotional safety, words begin to feel dangerous. In psychology, this is when emotions shift from expression to self-regulation. People become silent not because they have nothing to say, but because they have too much to say and no longer know what should be spoken and what should be kept inside. Every sentence now carries risk. It might hurt the other person, or worse, shake the very relationship they are trying to protect. And so, silence becomes a defense mechanism, an instinctive way of protecting love, even though that very silence slowly exhausts and isolates them. When people love deeply, they no longer speak from immediate emotion, but begin to think through fear of loss. Inside their minds live questions that are never spoken aloud. If I say this, what will they think? If I am too honest, will the relationship remain the same? This endless cycle of overthinking gradually pushes them toward silence. Psychology calls this an anxious attachment state, when someone places too much of their self-worth into love. Words are no longer seen as tools for connection, but as things capable of destroying everything in a single moment. Those who love deeply become extremely sensitive to their partner's reactions. A sigh, a distant look, or an unusual pause is enough to occupy their thoughts for hours. And the more they think, the less they speak. Silence here is not indifference, it is the result of trying desperately to keep everything stable. They endure their emotions internally, believing that speaking out may not solve anything, while silence at least avoids immediate conflict. There is a deeper layer of silence that only those who love very deeply experience: the feeling of helplessness in the face of their own emotions. When love grows strong enough, we do not just love the person in front of us, we also love the expectations, the imagined futures, and the fear that all of it could disappear. In inner philosophy, silence appears when language is no longer capable of expressing what is happening inside. Some emotions are simply too complex: love, fear, hope, and anxiety tangled together, so much so that even the one feeling them cannot name them clearly. Rather than speaking half-formed truths, they choose silence. Silence to observe, to feel, to confront their inner contradictions alone. Those who love deeply are not silent because they lack emotion, but because they have too much of it. And when the heart carries unresolved weight, silence becomes the only space where they can exist without shattering the relationship they cherish. The deeper people love, the more sensitive they become to even the smallest changes in the relationship, and this sensitivity slowly makes them quieter. A delayed reply, a less enthusiastic sentence, or a meeting that no longer feels complete can spark countless scenarios in their minds. In behavioral psychology, this is the stage where people shift from active communication to defensive communication. They no longer speak to explain their feelings, but speak, or remain silent, to prevent things from getting worse. Those who love deeply begin to observe more than they speak, understanding that words do not always bring comfort, but often expose differences between two people. Silence here is not avoidance. It is a temporary escape from potential pain. They hold their emotions inside not because they distrust their partner, but because they are unsure if they are strong enough to face the response. And so, silence becomes a safe zone, where they can exist without directly confronting the growing instability. Another deep reason people become silent when they love deeply is that the fear of loss becomes painfully real. When love is shallow, losing someone feels distant. But when love is deep, loss feels possible at any moment, making every action cautious. In inner philosophy, this is when love is no longer just an emotion, but a form of emotional survival. People are not only afraid of losing the one they love, but also afraid of losing the peaceful version of themselves that exists beside that person. And so, they choose silence as a way to preserve everything. They believe that if negative thoughts are left unspoken, the relationship will remain safe. Even as suppressed emotions continue to pile up inside, they accept it, because to them, silence still feels easier than facing the possibility of separation. Some people are silent in love not because they are weak, but because they have been hurt too many times before. Times when they spoke and were not heard, when they expressed themselves and were dismissed, gradually form a quiet belief that silence is safer than words. In psychology, this is a defensive reflex shaped by painful experience. When they love again, especially deeply, they no longer open up easily. They love with caution, restraint, and the fear of reopening old wounds. Silence here is not a lack of love, but a sign of someone trying to protect a heart that has already been broken. They still care, still worry, still think about the other person every day, but all of it stays inside, because they are no longer sure the world is safe enough to receive their sincerity one more time. As love deepens, people begin to understand that not every emotion needs to be spoken to prove its existence. At this stage, love becomes quieter, no longer needing constant verbal validation, but turning into something steady and enduring. In psychology, this is when emotion moves beyond the need for expression and enters the need for preservation. Those who love deeply grow silent not because they no longer wish to share, but because they fear words might diminish the value of what they feel. Some emotions feel too exposed, too fragile once spoken. Silence becomes the way they cradle love, keeping it as intact as possible. They love through actions, quiet care, and staying, even when there is little left to say. And within that silence, love grows deeper, yet lonelier, because not everyone is sensitive enough to recognize feelings left unspoken. People who love deeply often think too much, and overthinking eventually exhausts them from verbal communication. Before speaking, they imagine dozens of outcomes. After speaking, they analyze every reaction. This cycle drains them mentally and emotionally. In human behavior, silence appears as a necessary pause to regain balance. They are not silent because they do not want connection, but because they need space to breathe and untangle overlapping emotions. Loving deeply brings joy, but also invisible pressure to keep the relationship stable. When that pressure exceeds their capacity, silence becomes the only way to remain without being swept away by their own emotions. A truth few want to admit is that the silent one in deep love is often the one who loves more. They are the ones who compromise, forgive, and accept loss to keep peace. In psychology, this reflects a love rooted in self-sacrifice. Silence is not an easy choice for them, it is simply the least painful option among painful ones. They know that saying everything they think might change the relationship forever. And because they do not want to risk that, they keep their feelings to themselves. Yet prolonged silence slowly makes them feel isolated, as if they are loving alone within the relationship. Deep love binds them tightly, but also places them in the most vulnerable position. As love deepens, people reach a unique state where they no longer expect the other person to change for them. They understand that everyone carries limitations, wounds, and long-formed habits. In psychology, this is when love shifts from control to acceptance. But acceptance does not always bring relief. More often, it brings silence. Those who love deeply understand that expressing dissatisfaction may not lead to change, only to distance. And so, they remain silent to preserve harmony. They tell themselves that love is acceptance, while emotions quietly continue to accumulate. Silence becomes a silent compromise, where they sacrifice their voice in exchange for emotional safety. Over time, this unspoken sacrifice makes them feel smaller within the very relationship they once placed so much hope in. Many confuse silence with emotional distance, but in reality, silence in deep love often carries intense emotion. These are feelings that are hard to share, hard to name, and even harder to explain. In psychology, this reflects inner conflict, wanting to be understood while fearing that understanding will bring pain. Those who love deeply remain silent because they do not want love to turn into a tense confrontation. They fear that sharing their sadness will make the other person feel blamed, pressured, or inadequate. And so, everything stays inside. But silence does not erase emotion, it allows it to quietly linger. Over time, unexpressed feelings turn into exhaustion, disappointment, and the painful sense of no longer being truly seen. The deeper people love, the more they hide their sadness, afraid it will become a burden to the one they love. They do not want their partner to worry or feel responsible for their emotions. In inner philosophy, this is silent love, choosing endurance so the other can remain at peace. Silence here is not indifference, but protection, for both the loved one and themselves. Yet this protection comes at a heavy cost. When someone consistently hides their true emotions, they slowly lose connection with themselves. They love, but no longer feel loved in the right way. And within prolonged silence, love may still exist, but joy gradually fades, leaving behind an emptiness that is hard to name. Silence is not the end of love, but it often signals emotions that have been suppressed for too long. When love is deep, people become accustomed to carrying sadness alone, managing small wounds daily, and convincing themselves that everything will be fine. In psychology, this is emotional endurance, loving without feeling safe enough to express. They are silent not because they do not need understanding, but because they no longer trust they will be understood correctly. Silence may prevent conflict at first, but over time it creates an invisible distance between two people. Quiet, subtle, yet steadily growing. Those who love deeply often sense this distance first, but are also the ones most afraid to break it, fearing that one wrong word could collapse everything. In inner philosophy, the most dangerous thing in love is not conflict, but prolonged silence without the desire to explain. When people no longer wish to express their true feelings or be understood, they begin retreating inward. Deep love makes them quiet because they have invested too much to risk one more wound. Yet silence is not the only way to love. Psychology shows that the courage to speak depends on emotional safety. When people feel heard without judgment, they naturally open up. Therefore, silence in love reflects not only one person's emotions, but the quality of connection between two people. Deep love requires mutual understanding. Without it, silence slowly turns love into a one-sided monologue. Finally, if you are silent in a relationship, take a moment to ask yourself whether it is peace or endurance. Because loving deeply should not mean losing your own voice. Silence can be a sign of love, but lasting love requires more. It requires safety to speak, space to be vulnerable, and presence from both sides. When people no longer fear speaking, silence stops being a refuge and becomes simply a necessary pause. And perhaps the most mature form of love is not staying silent to hold on, but daring to speak, to be seen, to be understood, and to be loved for who you truly are.